A dangerous Bradford drug courier world came crashing down in a colossal way when a prolific dealer was stopped by police while transporting 57 kg of high purity Class A gear. White, worth according to police anywhere between 5.7 to £7 million worth. The 37-year-old Garry Sinclair had been under surveillance by the Serious Crime Unit of Bradford Police on Valley Road in Bradford on October 5, 2023. Now, Garry had opted to transport the white in an unsuspecting car, a Volkswagen Passat. However, when an unmarked police car stopped in front of him and a second police car pulled in from behind, police lights on, panic had set in very, very quickly. The worst thing was, police had performed a box manoeuvre while Garry was sat at a red light, meaning he had nowhere to escape and nowhere to go. Garry, well versed in crime, knew that carrying at least 5 kg of white carried a guideline sentence of 10 years. He was carrying 10 times that amount. So what the drug courier did was, after stalling the car and freezing momentarily, Garry put the car into reverse and then started reversing backwards. Made contact with the police car position behind him. The car was then put into first gear and then second gear. Garry tried to drive forward at speed, but there was only a 2-foot distance. Driving forward, police anticipated Garry's next move, so the police officer turned his car and pinned Garry's car against his and the tree. Garry was now firmly blocked in. Now, officers quickly exited their cars and then made a move for the dealer, who was quickly pulled out of his Passat, placed in handcuffs and then read his rights. According to police, when Garry was arrested, his face was pasty and pale and he was shaking. And the Volkswagen Passat was then searched. At first glance, police found £250 in cash and a one-way plane ticket. However, police then discovered 114 vacuum-sealed bags of high-purity white. Each half-kilo bag was estimated to be worth at street value between £50,500 and £60,000, with the purity of the bags ranging from 78% to a whopping 90%. Police also says that the entire quantity valued on a street level, if Garry sold the product of white for a fortune of between 5.7 million to 6.8 million pounds, the guy would have been rich beyond his wildest dreams. The total weight of the drug seized was 57 kilos. Now, despite his outward appearance of being shocked at being arrested while driving a Volkswagen Passat, Garry Sinclair, when interviewed, answered no comments to all questions. Police already knew that Garry was a major player in the drug market, but his source would have had to either come from a bigger kingpin or a direct source from overseas, somewhere like Colombia, Venezuela, or those kind of places. Garry Sinclair, of course, did not want to bear grass, and that's why he answered no comment, despite having over 3 police interviews. Questions were asked as to who was the supplier, where was the gear going to, where had you picked it up from, who else were you working with, and how long has the operation been running for. When police began to build on their investigation, they also noted that Garry Sinclair had no real address, but was a director of several companies, and was the signatory on more than 16 different bank accounts, where hundreds of thousands of pounds were being funneled through those accounts on a regular basis. Garry chose to plead guilty for possession of Class A with intent to supply, along with DD. Now, the judge noted when Garry was in court, he was a man of financial means and a person who loved money, as he had been previously arrested for possession of counterfeit money back in 2019. Now, Garry was sent to H&P Leeds on remand while awaiting his court date. In court, Garry's defence team attempted to paint Garry as a man who had made a poor decision and a victim. They argued that Garry was in a dark place at the time of the offence, as his relationship had ended and Garry was struggling to cope both emotionally and physically. He was also clinically depressed, and he found himself lending money at an alarming rate, and that resulted in a massive debt that needed to be paid back quickly. Garry's defence also stated that Garry had agreed to be a driver after losing his job, agreeing to move Class A from one place to another. However, Garry forgot that when it was brought up who he worked for and who he owed money to, and what was the debt for, Garry answered no comment, therefore his reasoning carried little substance. Garry's solicitor went on to say that Garry regretted his decision, and the reason he moved the gear was not for financial rewards or gain, but to benefit Garry to reduce his staggering debt. Furthermore, it was also stated that this was just a one-time incident, and there was absolutely no evidence that Garry had influence in any drug gang or was a made man that was positioned further up the criminal chain of command. Again, Garry was extremely and genuinely remorseful. Now, Garry was jailed for 10 years. 10 years. Does the crime match the sentence? Let me know in the comments. Stay safe.